Doordash hopes to raise as much as $2.8 billion in an IPO.
In December 2020, a man stood on a stage in New York and rang the opening bell for his company's IPO. His name was Tony Xu. He was 36 years old. His company, Doordash, had just debuted on the stock market at a valuation of $32 billion. And somewhere in the audience that day was his mother, the same woman who had once worked 3 jobs simultaneously just to keep the family alive. The same woman who decades earlier had carried her 5-year-old son off a plane in Illinois with a few $100s between them and no plan except to survive. Tony Xu didn't just build a food delivery company. He built it because of where he came from, because of a restaurant kitchen in a small American city, because of a mother who spent 12 years washing dishes and waiting tables so she could eventually become the doctor she had always been in China but wasn't allowed to be in America. And here is the part that makes this story different from most Silicon Valley founding myths. The problem Tony Xu was solving wasn't abstract. He had lived it. He had delivered it. If you're new here, we cover stories like this every week. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Tony Xu was born in Nanjing, China in 1984. His mother was a doctor. His father was an academic. Both were educated, respected, and completely unprepared for what it actually meant to immigrate to America. In 1989, when Tony was 5, the family landed in Champaign, Illinois, a flat, quiet university town in the middle of the country. His father enrolled in a PhD program in aerospace engineering and applied mathematics at the University of Illinois. His mother discovered that her Chinese medical license meant nothing in the United States. She couldn't practice, she couldn't work in the field she had spent her entire career building. So she did what immigrant parents do. She worked 3 jobs at once. One of them was as a server at a local Chinese restaurant. Tony went with her. Sometimes he was young, but he watched everything. The kitchen, the orders, the owner running the whole operation alone. Never enough time. Never enough staff. He started washing dishes alongside her. He watched his mother, a licensed physician, carrying plates of food to strangers so their family could pay rent. McDonald's was a luxury they rarely allowed themselves. Years later, standing in front of investors and journalists and cameras, Tony Xu would return to this again and again. Not as a story of hardship to be overcome, as the reason the company existed. He was a natural entrepreneur. At 9 years old, he ran a lawn mowing operation in the neighborhood. In high school, he was the kind of student who didn't just do well. He understood why he had to. His parents had moved to a foreign country, with nothing so that he could have something. That weight never left him. He studied industrial engineering at UC Berkeley, then worked as a business analyst at McKinsey, then eBay, then Stanford MBA. His birth name, Xu Shun, was difficult for Americans to pronounce. When he arrived in the US as a child, he chose a new name, Tony, after Tony Danza, the actor from his favorite television show. By 2012, he was at Stanford Graduate School of Business with 3 classmates, Andy Fang, Stanley Tang, and Evan Moore. They were working on a class project about apps for small businesses. They started interviewing local restaurant owners near campus. The same problems kept coming up: orders they couldn't fill, deliveries they couldn't handle, revenue left on the table because they didn't have enough staff. One afternoon, a woman who ran a small macaroon shop near Stanford told them she was turning away delivery orders every day. She simply didn't have anyone to send. She was losing money she had already earned. Tony heard that and felt something specific, not an abstract market opportunity. A specific frustration he had watched his mother navigate for years on the other side of the counter. They went back to the apartment and built a prototype website in a single day. They called it paloaltodolary.com. They printed out menus from local restaurants, taped them to a PDF, posted it online, and listed a phone number. When orders came in, they delivered the food themselves. Within months, they joined Y Combinator, the startup accelerator, and received $120,000 in seed funding. They changed the name to Doordash. They kept delivering food personally, not just for the cash, but because Tony insisted the only way to understand the logistics was to live them. He delivered food alongside his drivers for years, wearing the red bag, navigating traffic, timing routes, watching where the system broke down. In 2014, Doordash raised $17 million in a Series A. By then, they had 1,000 restaurant partners across the Bay Area and Los Angeles. But here's where things nearly ended. In 2015, Uber launched a dedicated food delivery app called Uber Eats. It exploded. Uber had millions of drivers already on the road, unlimited capital, and one of the most recognizable brands in the world. Suddenly, DoorDash wasn't disrupting the restaurant industry. It was fighting for survival against one of the most aggressive companies in Silicon Valley. At the same time, DoorDash was struggling to raise its next funding round. Investors who had watched the gig economy stumble, Uber and Lyft burning billions, questions about driver classification, on-demand startups collapsing, had grown cold on the entire category. Term sheets were pulled at the last minute. The company was running out of runway. Tony Xu described that period as the closest DoorDash came to not existing. They survived, barely. The decision that saved them was one that looked wrong on paper. While Uber Eats and Grubhub were fighting over dense city centers, Manhattan, downtown San Francisco, Chicago, DoorDash went the other direction. They went to the suburbs. Suburbs were ignored. Suburbs were messy. Suburbs had long distances between restaurants and customers, spread out demand, fewer drivers per square mile. Everyone assumed the economics couldn't work there. DoorDash made them work. They built logistics infrastructure specifically for the suburbs, figured out how to route efficiently over longer distances, and quietly captured an entire market that none of their competitors cared about. By March 2019, DoorDash had surpassed Grubhub to become the largest food delivery platform in the United States. They had gone from near extinction in 2015 to market leader in 4 years, against Uber. Then COVID hit. Every restaurant in America was forced to close its dining room overnight. The only way people could get food from their favorite local spots was delivery. DoorDash, the company built specifically for the moment when people weren't going out, tripled its revenue in a single year. The suburban bet that analysts had mocked had planted them in exactly the neighborhoods where people were now working from home and ordering every meal. In December 2020, DoorDash went public at $32.4 billion. Tony Xu's 5% stake made him a billionaire at 36. He wrote a letter to be included in the IPO prospectus. In it, he described his mother, the doctor who became a restaurant server, the woman who worked 3 jobs for 12 years so she could eventually open her own medical practice. He said DoorDash existed to build a platform for people like her, people who came to this country with a dream and the willingness to work, but needed better tools to make it work. Today, DoorDash holds over 56% of the US food delivery market. It operates in 40 countries. It reported its first annual profit in 2024, $117 million on revenues of nearly $11 billion. The company that nearly died in 2015 now generates more revenue in a week than Tony's mother earned in years of waiting tables. The kid who washed dishes in a Chinese restaurant in Illinois while his mother served food to pay the rent built the largest food delivery company in America. He built it for the restaurant owners. He built it for the drivers. He built it for every immigrant who arrived in a new country and had to work 3 jobs at once because the system didn't recognize what they already knew how to do. He built it in the most direct sense possible for his mother. If you want more stories like this, there's a playlist on this channel. And if this one taught you something new, hit like. It helps more people find these stories. See you in the next one.